So in the aftermath of the first Iraq War, George Bush Sr. put out a message over Voice of America, and the military dropped leaflets over Iraqi army divisions saying, now's your chance, rise up and overthrow Saddam Hussein, implying that we would back their effort, encouraging them to do it. And America occupied the entire south of the country at the time. And Saddam was surrendering to our terms. Well, then what happened was they changed their mind. They realized that Iranian-backed Iraqi militias and perhaps even Iranian Quds Force or Revolutionary Guards were coming across to help lead the revolution. And they realized, oops, we are actually importing the Iranian Revolution that we just backed Saddam for 8 years against Iran to contain, to try to overthrow, and then settled for containing. Oops. And so they panicked and they stopped and they left them high and dry like a great bay of pigs in the desert. And this is in the weeks after the first Iraq War. And so Saddam was allowed to keep his attack helicopters and some of its tanks, and 100,000 people were killed, Shia and Kurds, in a brutal suppression of their uprising by Saddam's forces. And I cite in my book a journalist named Barry Lando who says that at one point American helicopters landed on a highway to prevent an Iraqi army division from marching on Baghdad, to stop them after encouraging them. 100,000 people were killed. Well, after that, they said, oh, gee, isn't that sad? You know what we should do? We have to keep our bases in Saudi Arabia now so that we can have these no-fly zones over Iraq, where if Saddam ever tries to fly his helicopters again, now that he's done winning and putting down this insurrection, well, then we'll shoot down his helicopters or whatever few jets he has left if they ever try to do anything. So that became their excuse to stay in Saudi, and then also to enforce the blockade against Iraq because surrender wasn't good enough. And the complete and total destruction of all of his weapons of mass destruction, his chemical weapons stocks, was over by the end of 1991. And that wasn't good enough. So they had to pretend that they were still on this snipe hunt, looking for the secret nuclear weapons program or whatever nonsense the whole time. So they kept the country under blockade and under the excuse, you know, the famous quote that, yes, we think the price is worth it. Leslie Stahl asked Bill Clinton's Secretary of State in 1996, Madeleine Albright, we've heard that 500,000 children have died in the blockade, which is accurate. Read Joy Gordon, Invisible War. She says, we have heard that 500,000 people have died. And that's more, or 500,000 children have died. That's more than died at Hiroshima. So is the price worth it? And Madeleine Albright says, yes, we think the price is worth it. Well, so what's the price? Worth it for what? Worth it. The policy was explicitly, Dave, that if we starve the Iraqi people enough and make them desperate enough, finally they will risk everything to rise up and overthrow Saddam Hussein, which is just what they just tried to do when we encouraged them to do it and stabbed them in the back and left them high and dry to be slaughtered. And now we're starving them so that they'll be in a stronger position to try again.
Yeah, you're not talking about children.
That's impossible.
These 500,000 children, and I play this clip all the time. I mean, I've shown this to my girlfriend and freaked her out. I showed this to anybody who ever asked the question, why do they hate us? And this is from years before 9/11, so don't give me any of that 9/11 shit. This is our Secretary of State saying it's cool that 500,000 children died. And by the way, we're not talking about pleasant child deaths. These are children dying from starvation, from malnutrition, and from not getting basic medical needs. I mean, these are like really the most brutal shit in the world that you can imagine. And this is before we even have this 9/11 nonsense justification where there's even the slightest argument that if we don't fight them over there, we're going to have to fight them over here. No one even has that in their head. There's no chance that we're fighting them over here. And this is what's accepted foreign policy. So, I mean, it's unbelievable to this day what you see when Trump talks about North Korea. I mean, it's like this is just like starving their people is still an option on the table. Maybe that's and it's seen as almost like the reasonable one. Like, well, hey, we won't go to war. We'll just start starving their people because they're not starving enough.
Think about what a great euphemism sanctions is. Because that could mean anything, right? That could mean this one official in the defense ministry can't open a checking account in Europe somewhere. or it could mean a total global blockade on all international trade. You know, you think about the embargo against Cuba.
Yeah, that was nothing.
Against Cuba, they could still skirt it and trade with anybody else they wanted, just not with us. But the embargo against Iraq, the sanctions against Iraq, was a total global United Nations Security Council resolution embargo, and it was permanent. It could not even be repealed unless the Americans, because we have the veto, right? So if anybody else even tried to repeal it, we could stop them. It would take a new resolution to end it.